Hey everyone, and welcome to the Creative Financing Podcast. I'm Nicole Kamanjian. I'm here with Cody Richard and the host of this show, Jeff Rappaport. This is episode 243, and today we're going to go over part 4 of how to determine when and how to write creative financing offers. While listening to this episode, if you guys have questions, please head over to the Creative Financing Podcast Facebook group. If you're not part of the community, just search the Creative Financing Podcast in Facebook and ask to join. There will be a live session on the second Thursday of every month, so bring your questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can ask your questions in the comments below. Lastly, we want to thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this podcast with your friends.
So welcome, and I thank you both for joining me, and I'm kind of excited to continue on with this series. I think it should be really helpful, and so this is episode 4, part 4. You definitely want to go back and listen to the first 3 parts, and we're going to do this in a couple of different ways, and I think that it'll really help people seeing some different perspectives. So what I thought we would do today is talk about what I do when I'm looking at analyzing a lead and how to kind of determine what I want to do with that lead and how to try to structure offers. We went through with what Cody does, and it's probably going to be very similar. Cody and I do have a history together, and but I kind of wrote it out, so it'll be a little easier maybe to follow. And in our next episode, we're going to put Nicole to the test and let her try to work through an example. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing. First of all, you guys can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So when I'm looking at trying to analyze leads and determine if any kind of creative financing may work, it's going to start with how that lead was pre-screened to begin with, right? So whoever is talking to this lead, whether it's a lead manager, whether it's an acquisition manager, or it's you, there are some questions that need to be asked. And if they're not, you're just guessing whether someone's going to be open to it or not. So we typically will say, would you consider taking payments for your equity over some time? And you can say that in a number of ways. I think Cody had a little different way. Cody, do you remember off the top of your head how you say it?
Yeah, if we're able to pay X asking price or near asking price, are you open to taking payments for the property long term?
There you go. Okay. So there are a number of ways that you can ask it, and what you need to do is ask it. And I would tell you, for me, there's certain words I don't like using. Like, I don't want to use owner finance, and it's like I don't want to use the word wholesaling. I might describe it, but I'd rather call owner finance terms or paying in installments, something to that effect. Not that there's anything wrong with owner finance. It's just that sometimes there is a negative connotation to it. So I try to stay away from that. So if they say yes or maybe, if you now follow up with something similar to this, you will get so much more information that will help you in determining how and whether you want to write an offer. And typically we put little to no money down on these types of transactions. I assume that would work for you. And if they say yes, well, what'd we just get? We got a property for little to no money down. And the answer more often than not is going to be no. Right. And they're going, I'm going to follow up, or whoever is going to follow up and say, I totally understand. How much of a down payment do you need? Or what's the least that you would accept? Something to that effect. Right. So we start to get an idea, because the lead quality is very different. And both of you certainly chime in on this. If someone says that they would accept a 3 to 5% down payment as opposed to a 15 to 30% down payment.
Yeah, and the motivation behind why is usually pretty important too. And I'm sure
Right.
you ask, but something I try to ask is, okay, why do you need 20% down? And a lot of times they just want it to, because that's what the banks get, or that's what
And they
makes them
don't
comfortable.
trust you yet, right?
Exactly.
That's what they think they need to get
Hmm.
to be able to trust you. And I love when, if someone says 20, 25, 30, 40% down, oh, it sounds like there's something specific you need that money for. Yeah, may I ask, well, what are you going to use that down payment for? And if they tell me they're going to stick it in the bank or do nothing with it, now we have a conversation regarding that, right? Um, and then the other might be is let's talk about the length of term. And and you can say this in a number of different ways. Is 10 years long enough term, or would you like to go longer? Um,
I like that wording.
and you've said it differently. I've said it a number of different ways. I've done before. How long would you like to continue to make money on your equity? Something like that. I like this because I'm already setting like 10 years is like my anchor. And so sometimes they'll feel like 10 years is like the minimum. Uh, is the property free and clear? Do you have a mortgage on it? If you don't get this information, truly, it is going to be very difficult to make. If there is debt on the property, you need to know approximately how much it is, and you certainly need to know what a monthly payment looks like. And if you don't have that information, we're guessing. It's a total guess, right? Um, so I always like to say, is the property free and clear? Because hey, if it is, no one ever has a problem saying yes, right? And then they feel like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, right? Rather than, hey, what do you owe on it? By the way, I only did what do you owe on it for probably the first 10 years of my real estate career. And it still worked, right? I feel like this works a little better though. Approximately how much do you still owe? What's your monthly payment? And does that include the taxes and insurance? Both of you are familiar with that type of questioning, correct? And
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
Cody, does that help you in your business when you're able to get some of those added details?
Yeah, it does a couple things. First, it saves me time because it takes some time to write offers. And if you know what they need or what they're looking for, it makes life way easier. And two, when I have a conversation with them, it's easier to get a yes or no answer.
Right.
Whereas, oh, my payment's actually $200 a month higher than what you offered. Okay, now we got to go back and rework, see if it
Yeah.
works. It just takes a lot of time.
That's very true. So you kind of go into when you are making the offers of what the conversation is going to be when presenting the offers,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, I would agree. All right. So first thing that I like to do is I run comparables on the properties. Let's find out what the ARV is. And but there's no better way to run the comparables than the MLS. But if you work in multiple markets, you work nationwide, or you're pretty new and you don't have access to the MLS, what we do is we use Zillow, Privy, and Batch Leads. Um, None of them are the best. Uh, I feel like with all three we can do a decent job. I would much prefer the MLS in every market, but you deal with what you have. Then there's some other stuff. There's Redfin, there's PropStream, there's other softwares. But these are the three that we currently use. Okay. And then we're going to run rental comparables. And the reason that we want to do this is it may not fit for every lead, but really what I'm trying to do is just gauge a number of, if I'm going to potentially try to sell this to an owner occupant, I just want to know what the current rents are and what a payment would look like to that person and how different are they going to be. It may or may not affect what my offers are going to be, but it kind of gives me some direction. And we use Rentometer, we use Bigger Pockets, Rent Estimator. Both of those are much better to use with a paid membership. Okay. You can also use Zillow, apartments.com, and any other site that may have some current rents on it. So you actually get an idea of what current things are going for.
Yeah, and I can't speak to BP Rent Estimator, but I know Rentometer, you can do like 5 free ones. If you ever wanted to just try it out, you can try out a few properties, see what kind of info they give you.
The free version, and I believe that they still offer a free version, but you will want more detailed information. It's a good, it's better than nothing, but it's not enough to really bank on. So
Yeah.
all right, so you guys have seen this before because we have talked about it a few times on the podcast. I've certainly talked about it in the apprentice program. I talk about it in the academy. And I think that the more that we look at deal structuring, this just helps me figure out where I want to go with some offers. And so it's looking at what are my potential exit strategies. And this list could be significantly longer. It really depends what you are doing. And so that we could add short-term rentals here, right? Vacation rentals. We could add novations. These are more what I believe to be kind of the core exit strategies and more of what we do. So if you have more, just add more. If you do even less, then cut some out. But figure out which ones may apply because they don't all apply to every lead. So, like, is the exit strategy to wholesale it? Could we be wholesaling it to a landlord or a flipper or an owner occupant? They will vary within that one exit strategy. Do we want to rehab it? Do we want to wholesale it, which is kind of in the middle of a wholesale and a retail type property, maybe something that's dated, that doesn't need a lot of work, and you're selling it for more than a wholesale, but less than retail. Rent, whether it's buy and hold, short or long term. The BRRRR strategy, where you're buying it under market value enough where you could do some repair work to it and then be able to refinance, pull all or most of your money back out of it. And then my favorite, which is selling on terms, more than likely, and it could be selling on terms to another investor, or it could be selling on terms to an owner occupant and staying in the middle, getting the true passive income. Do either of you have any questions?
No,
Nope.
I think that all makes sense.
Good.
It's a good review too of the things that we actually kind of talk about almost every episode, like, especially when we're doing case studies.
Yeah, it really kind of is. And I don't want to make it too redundant, but for me, and you will see when I go through, and even when we help you go through, Nicole, that it really kind of narrows down what direction you want to try to go in. And sometimes, all of them may apply. Like you got a free and clear property and they're willing to discount, and maybe there's a good amount of equity. I mean, I could rehab it, I could sell it, I could wholesale it, I could wholetail it, I could BRRRR it, I could do any number of different things. And then sometimes there will be one, and that's it. So understanding that kind of helps direct you in terms of what kinds of offers you want to make. So what I like to do is just start eliminating the ones that won't work, right? And the ones that are really simple are, hey, there's not enough equity, so we're basically eliminating retailing it. We may eliminate wholetailing it, and we may eliminate wholesaling it if we're just talking about a particular price. So if someone owed 250, their property is worth 300 and it needs $25,000 in work. Um, you know, let's say $40,000 in work. There's not enough room, right? So we can basically eliminate all of those right off the bat. High monthly payments may eliminate being able to rent it or selling it to an owner occupant. Maybe doing long-term rental, but maybe not short-term rental. So these are the things that will kind of go into your decision making. Larger down payments. It may really depend on who you are planning on selling it to. For me, when I'm planning on selling it to an owner occupant, I'm counting on 10% down payment or thereabouts. So if someone wants 10% or 15%, that is a potential issue for me. But if I'm selling it to a landlord will typically pay more money down. And so now I could offer 10% and still feel pretty good about it. If I'm buying them for myself, I have my own budget where, hey, I don't want to spend more than 10% or 14% or whatever it may be. So these are the kinds of things that are going to help keep you on course, right? Give you some direction of where you need to go. All right. So here are some very basic things to remember when trying to structure owner finance deals. Down payment is very important to you. And so we are always trying to get in light. And light means, again, going back to what we were just talking about, depending on who we may be selling this property to. If we're selling a commercial property and they might expect to be putting down 25%. So if they only had to put down 20%, it's still a deal for them. Or they might even be willing to put down 25 or 30% if the rest of the terms are just really outstanding. Mm-hmm. I might be able to get 20% from my owner occupant. However, do I want to bank on that? I personally would not. To me, it's like 10% is the tip top of that, and then I'm hoping to just break even on the front end of the whole thing. So, and this is all based on more like wholesaling. If I'm trying to keep the property, obviously, I'm going to look at certain other criteria. And so the more down payment, let's say I wanted to keep this as a buy and hold, the more that I put down, the better cash flow I better get, right? Because one of the things I'm going to look at is what kind of return on investment am I getting and what kind of cash on cash return. So the more I got to put in, the lower my cash on cash return is going to be. The less I put in, more than likely my cash on cash return is going to be higher. And as investors, we want to conserve our own capital, and whether we use someone else's or whether it's we're able to get ours back in a fairly quick amount of time. But otherwise, we only have a finite amount of money to use, and then we're kind of stuck, right? We can't buy anything else. So keeping that down payment light. The monthly payment, to me, this is where, that these are probably the two most important variables to me, the down payment and the monthly. And if you've watched our podcast before, you've seen us work backwards and determine net operating income, or money that's left over that we can split between our debt service and our cash flow. And when we know what those numbers are, it's pretty easy to structure, hey, our monthly payment really cannot exceed this amount. And And then you have a range, and the more money that you have to work with, then you can create a range. So you could create multiple offers to the seller based on, hey, I can offer you this much money a month with these terms, or I can offer you even more money per month, but with a little different terms. But understanding where you need to be, and this can be an easy deal breaker for me. I assume it is for you as well, Cody. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like you said, those are the big two.
Yeah. And this third one is certainly important, and probably more important today when we're doing this podcast as opposed to 3, 4, 5 months ago, where the market was very, very good, still going up, was a seller's market. Interest rates were still, reasonable, and the amount of term wasn't as important. Now we're dealing with rising interest rates. We're dealing as it's swaying, at least from a seller's to a buyer's market, and we don't really know where values and or interest rates will be, in a year, 2, 3, 5, and so we'd like longer term so that we can weather whatever storm may be coming. And what real estate tends to do is it's like it's like a hill, right? And so if we're going down, we want to have enough time so when we have to deal with this property, we're back on the upswing, and things are a little different situation. So the longer the term, the better, with a couple exceptions, right? If we're trying to structure offers to rehab this property, or to wholesale to a rehabber, or to do a BRRRR strategy, we don't really need long term. It's funny. I see people advertise properties with owner finance, and they say 5 years, but it's structured as like a BRRRR, which you want to refinance in like 12 to 18 months, but you've got a 10-year term, and it's like, what am I going to do with the 10 years? And you just didn't go into it thinking about what your exit strategies are. Okay.
And to your point, talking about the longer term, like I have someone that just countered my 15-year term offer, and they wanted to do a 5-year. A year or two ago, I'd probably make that work. I'd probably accept it. Now it just feels too risky on that balloon payment to put myself or the end buyer, owner occupant, whatever it might be, in a bad position. So yeah, market's definitely shifting.
Yeah, I have one exactly the same right now. It's much tighter than yours. Is they want a 5-year term. I've told them the least I can really do is 7, and I've gone through why, right? And he's like, well, I'm protected, and I said, you're right, you are, unless the value comes down significantly, but I'm not protected. And I've already told them I'm not the one living in it, right? There'll be a buyer, and that buyer won't be protected. And if I can't make it a win-win-win situation for everyone, then it's not going to work. What about price, Cody? What do you what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, like you said here, it's the least important, but I don't like to go too far over market value, especially if it needs repairs. If it's something in great shape, I'm willing to pay right about market value for it on terms, because when I dispo it, it's going to be above market value when I go to sell it.
Yep.
But I don't like to stretch that line too far.
I'm with you, and I can overpay for a property to some degree, and but you got to understand that, hey, if I paid $1 million for a house that's worth 400,000, but I'm only paying $1,000 a month for the next 30 years or whatever, principal only payments. Could that work? Yeah, we could make that work depending on what the down payment is, right? But the one thing you need to know is that it starts to eliminate your flexibility. You really can't sell the property. You can't really get out of it. You've got to be committed to it, and maybe committed to it long term. So I don't mind something that I'm overpaying, but hey, within 2 years, 3 years, hey, we're right side up again, rather than, hey, in 10 years, we'll be like, if the property appreciates 3% a year, we'll probably be okay. No, that's a little bit much for me. All right. So, any questions? And what I want to do is wrap this up. And then our next episode, we're going to use these principles. Nicole, you are going to, and you are going to work on an example, and we're going to help you go through and create some offers.
Sounds good.
All right.
Like I said in previous episodes, it makes complete sense when you guys are doing it. But when it comes to me, I start drawing blanks. So this should be good.
Yeah. Well, and you're not the only one. Let's be clear about that, we can make it sound, hey, that makes sense. I get it. Do this, do that. But when it comes time to do it yourself, it's like, wait, where do I start? What are the numbers I use? And it takes a little practice, just like everything else that you've ever learned, right? People want to make this like a much bigger deal than it really is, and it's really no different. I mean, I assume you can run, right, Nicole? But you had to learn to crawl and walk before you could run, and then it probably took you some time to be able to run a little faster. And this is no different. We're going to try to simplify it and make it nice and easy.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of this, and go out and create some terms.